Hello everyone, I hope your day is going well. In this episode, we will talk about variables and what they are. Let's go! Don't forget this channel have a dedicated Discord server. It's a place where you can talk about the episodes and tutorials of this channel. Maybe you wonder something about the last episode that was a bit unclear. Or maybe you just want to say hello. And for those who wish to go the extra mile to support the channel, there's a link to my Buy Me a Coffee page, and also there's a membership option here on YouTube. Thank you. In Java and all other coding languages, you need to be able to store data somehow. This data can be a lot of different things, depending on what you're trying to do. Are you making an app for recipes? You would need to be able to store the instructions for each recipe in text somehow. Or are you making a calculator? You would then need to be able to store numbers, and so on. This is where variables comes in. There are a few different ones. These are the most common ones, these four right here, and some less common ones down here. First we have an integer, and integers stores whole numbers between this value and this value. It's 2.14 billion something. So it's quite large, but it's not huge. And the reason why Java only allows you to have numbers between this and that when it comes to integers is because Java allocates a certain amount of memory in your computer for each integer variable. So every variable takes up a certain amount of memory, and so you don't go outside that memory. Nothing you really have to worry about, Java takes care of it, but you need to be keeping yourself in between those two values here. The same goes for everything else pretty much. Then we have something called a Boolean, and a Boolean can either be true or false. It can't be maybe, it can't be both or neither. This isn't quantum mechanics, so it's either true or it's false. And you assign it by just saying true, lowercase, or false, lowercase. That's it. Then we have something called a float. And float stores numbers with up to 7 decimals. And it needs an F at the end. If you didn't have an F, you would get an error because you were trying to store something else. We'll get to that later down here. So a float is a number with decimals. It can be very large. There is a limit, but it's very large. But the limit here is the amount of decimals after the dot there. And when you assign decimals to a number, you use dot and not comma. You don't use anything else. It's 4.54, etc. And don't forget the F at the end. And next up we have something called a string. And a string variable, this is the name of the variable, of course, maybe I should have mentioned it. This is the type of variable, this is the name for that variable. So the variable int with the name number gets that value, etc, etc, etc. And for string we have the type is a string, the name is text, and this is the value. And you put the value, or rather the text, between two quotation marks. Then we have some less common ones, such as the byte, which can store a number between -128 to +127. And the use case for bytes are very rare in my experience. The last time I worked with them was when I was trying to calculate the size of memory when working in shaders for 2D graphics. So yeah, the use case for bytes are rare, at least in my experience, but it's one of the variable types that we have in Java. And next one we have our shorts, and shorts are also whole numbers between this number right here and that number. And the use case for shorts are even more rare than bytes in my experience. I don't even remember when I used it the last time, but short is a type of variable that we can use in Java for whatever reason you need to use it. Maybe you want to save on memory and you know that you will be in between this range and that range, but you will not be able to contain within this range. Then maybe short is your go-to variable because you can save a little bit of memory. Then next up we have the long variable, and it's a very big number. It stores whole numbers between, well, this number and that number. So it's quite large. And you can see that it's a long by the L at the end. If you don't have it, you're going to get an error. So a big L for long. Here we have a lowercase f. here we have an uppercase L. And the last time I used long is in my game loops, because I need to store the nanoseconds in something, and an integer is simply not big enough to store nanoseconds, so we use long for that. Next up we have a double. It's like a float, but with far more decimals at the end. And you don't specify any letters at the end. You just keep it as is. And the difference between double and float is that a float can have up to 7 decimals, and a double can have 16 decimal, which is far more precise. So if you really need to be very precise, then you would need to use a double. Otherwise, float is good enough. And the last one we have is char, short for character. And you store a letter in a char variable. You can store it as this, but see the difference? We are using quotation marks, but these are the single ones. These are the double ones. I don't know what they actually are called, but yeah, you need to be careful with that. You cannot use the normal quotation marks for chars. You need to use the single ones. Why? I don't know. That's just the way it is. And you can also store characters with their ASCII values. This, for example, is the capital A. Then at the bottom here, I should probably change this a little bit. Shouldn't be hello. We can start with text dot to uppercase. And what I want to demonstrate at the bottom here is that string is actually a class. So we can take the variable of a string and do different things with it. For example, if we take this text and we can see a couple of options. We can to uppercase, we can have to lowercase. We can get a substring between different positions in the string. But let's just go with uppercase. And if I run this now, we should get this string of text to uppercase. And we do. And we can of course have to lowercase. And we run it now. This is a text to lowercase, and so on. String is a class, so we can actually do a lot of things with just the variable itself. But you don't need to memorize everything, all the methods in a string. If you need to make it all capital, you know that string is a class and there might be a method for it already. And you don't actually have to store a string in a variable to get that use case. So here we have hello world. We have big letters and then we have small letters. Let's give it a shot and see what happens. Hello world. And we can go to uppercase as well. And now we get uppercase. I just want to demonstrate that string is a class and that you can manipulate a string in a lot of ways depending on what you want to do. So yeah, this is all the Java variables that you can play with, and depending on your need, there's a variable for that. Next episode, we will cover something called operators. That means plus, minus, division, and so on. We will also try to take an integer and add that with a float variable, and vice versa. I hope to see you there as well. Take care now. Bye.